it seemed like a good idea. Bring together leaders from 90 countries and get them to agree to support Ukraine, thereby forcing Russia into making peace. Sadly, it didn't work. India, South Africa and Saudi Arabia couldn't even agree that Ukraine should have territorial integrity. So what was the point of all that? Kateryna Malofieieva is a journalist in Kharkiv and joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is the kind of the perception, the reaction in Ukraine to these kind of summits, and especially when what comes out of it seems to be a lack of concrete support for Ukraine. Is that disappointing?
In Ukraine, this is actually there are different opinions among the people, among the population, because obviously everyone expects the peace to establish at some point, and ideally as soon as possible. So, but majority of the opinions that I heard, they do not agree that some big countries that didn't sign the final communique after the as a result of the summit. It doesn't really it doesn't affect that much the very fact of the summit that happened, because first and foremost, the key result of the summit, of this peace summit, is actually that the majority of the countries agreed with the formula suggested by Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukrainian president, not by any other, not by Russia, not by China, not any other countries. They agreed, and even the prevailing majority of the countries signed the final communique, right? It also shows that the process have started. So we know that there are two ways of dealing the front line, the war, and diplomatic. So the diplomatic way of finishing the war has started, and it will be now working in the paradigm of in particular Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and I think that it was quite smart to establish those three main points that Zelenskyy suggests should be. Yeah.
I mean, this may seem naive, but what is the point, I suppose some people would ask, of discussing anything that's happening between Ukraine and Russia without Russia present? I mean, they were not invited, but is that not the problem?
Oh, actually, I absolutely agree with you. And yesterday's as a result of the communication, few Ukrainian leaders mentioned that at the next peace talks that might even happen before the U.S. election, they might happen even this year, that Russia will be invited. But there was the day before summit began, there was an ultimatum by Vladimir Putin, showing that absolutely unacceptable the way of resolving the conflict, and shows actually that it was impossible to negotiate. Some majority of the countries actually didn't really take it seriously, except for probably the countries of the global south.
Yes, that's interesting. Kateryna, thank you very much for that. That is Kateryna Malofieieva. She's a journalist in Kharkiv.
We see each other everywhere. How are you? Good, thank you. You know Didier Reynders, European Commission.
Pleasure. See you.
Yeah.
I will run. Sorry.
Invite the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
The very idea of war has already lost. Putin should switch from the language of ultimatums to the language of the world majority, which wants a just peace. I wish this to anyone. I sincerely wish that all of The UN Charter is the basis for us. And then, when the action plan is on the table, agreed by all, and transparent for the peoples, then it will be communicated to the representatives of Russia. And so that at the second peace summit we can fix the real end of the war. Now we are starting this path together. We must prove that the united world is a world of peace, a world that knows how to act correctly.
Kamala Harris.
Thank you. Thank you, President. And let nothing about the end of this war be decided without Ukraine. By contrast, however, yesterday, Putin put forward a proposal. But we must speak truth. He is not calling for negotiations, he is calling for surrender.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Excellencies, we have freezing the conflict today with foreign troops occupying Ukrainian land is not an answer. In fact, it is a recipe for future wars of aggression. Instead, we need to support a comprehensive, just, and sustainable peace for Ukraine.
It is true, peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without involving Russia. But let us not forget that, as we speak, Russia continues to relentlessly wage its brutal war. We all know Russia could end this war today or at any given moment once it ceases its onslaught and withdraws troops from Ukraine.
I renew the State of Qatar's call on all parties to comply with Charter of United Nations and international law, respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, to uphold our collective commitment to settle international disputes by peaceful means, and to refrain from threatening to or resorting to the use of force.
And we will continue to lend our support to all efforts to facilitate dialogue between both parties. We believe it is important that the international community encourage any step towards serious negotiations, which will require difficult compromise as part of a roadmap that leads to peace. And here it is essential to emphasize that any credible process will need Russia's participation.
Of the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak.
And we should ask, why does Russia feel that they are so threatened by a summit discussing the basic principles of territorial integrity, food security, and nuclear safety? Instead, Russia's representative at the United Nations recently said, the only topic for any international meetings on Ukraine will be the unconditional surrender of the Kyiv regime. Well, that will never happen, because aggression cannot and will not prevail.
Russia's aggression against Ukraine is unlawful, unjust, and a violation of the fundamental principles of international law, which honor the sovereign equality of nations, upholds their territorial integrity, and advocates the peaceful resolution of all disagreements. The war in the Middle East has been equally devastating. So is the case with the war in the Sahel region in Africa, in Eastern DRC, in Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, and of course in the Sudan.
Thank you.